Hello, my name is Frederick, and this is my final presentation for PA 522, Psychology and Culture of Terrorism at Upper Iowa University. The topic of discussion is understanding terrorism in the cyber landscape. Cybersecurity and terrorism are a common issue present throughout the United States. Terrorism and policies created to mitigate it have only been in place for the last several decades, as more information has become readily available to the subject. Studies have found that there is a significant gap in policy creation towards cybersecurity and terrorism. Analyzing what cybersecurity is and the current policies in place will provide a deeper understanding into why it coexists within most individuals' lives throughout the country. Artificial intelligence is one of the most advanced types of technology found in much of the U.S., and it poses a potential threat to the cybersecurity landscape. This research looks to answer what types of terrorism is active throughout the U.S., including cyber terrorism. Utilizing a mixed method approach, it is clear that agencies will play an integral role in helping understand the geography of the cybersecurity landscape. The United States is among several nations that can be classified as industrial and thriving as technology becomes a focal point through human interaction. While these breakthroughs in the technological world are vital to how humanity works through problems, it can also open the door for new types of terrorism. This brings about the need for real-world answers for today's risks. As society begins to grow with advancements in technology, the threats for cyber terrorism become more imminent. Terrorism is a term that is thrown around throughout history, but it is a relatively new idea at the same time. Hamden, 2019. It is not often that cyber terrorism is highlighted as a threat or a hazard that needs consideration. Cybersecurity and mitigation from cyber terrorism are in the hands of each individual. According to Hamden, 2019, while many people throughout society know about terrorism, they lack the understanding that the information each person puts into technology can make them vulnerable to cyber terrorism. A large feature of this is not knowing the short-term and long-term signs of cyber terrorism or having the ability to report it to the correct authority as part of the mitigation process. Chertoff, 2017, explained that cybersecurity is a prominent theme that represents what comprises national security. The explanation provides the example of needing to create a vaccine for a disease. Chertoff, 2017. From this, Chertoff, 2017, created this idea of using artificial intelligence to describe how human interaction and information is shared across networks. This information is vital to the health and safety of humanity. This remark puts an elevated risk on it for cyber terrorists to take the information, twist around the details, and put it out in the hands of the public. Cisco 2020 aimed to define how cybersecurity is an integral part of reducing vulnerability. Cybersecurity is a complex process that is driven by taking a step-by-step approach with various types of technology. With that, the benefits of the study will be increased dialogue of what processes exist in the vastly developing technological world. Society needs to be supported with unique and creative solutions for their threats. A large significance will be placed over the personal information and data that is available on different platforms. These can range from phone numbers and addresses to social security numbers and bank accounts. The cyber world encompasses a plethora of facets that all have one common weak link, which is cyber terrorists. Preliminary research supports that there are many gray areas in current policy for counterterrorism on the cyber front. Furthermore, members of society may not be using the best techniques to curb terrorist attacks, including identity theft and draining of bank accounts. This is just the beginning of the overarching discussion on counterterrorism in the cyber landscape as it is found in the United States. Research into cybersecurity and methods for combating cyber terrorism are still widely being discovered. Literature that is comprised of these ideas has a sole obligation to help us understand what considerations need to be made as part of the methodology. There are minimalistic ideas that are highlighted as part of cybersecurity protocol throughout the United States. Some of these ideas are in existence from outdated policy. This looks to analyze both sides of the issue and present a detailed overview of the cybersecurity situation as it has been happening in both a micro and macro capacity. The focus will be on how psychology is related to terrorism, the impact of technology growth, what cybersecurity is, and the policies currently in place as a means to a comprehensive list of counterterrorism strategies that provide rationale for their use. Much can be said about the correlations between cybersecurity, terrorism, and human psychological response to these items. There are a few motivational processes that are jump-started in the brain following trauma. Kim, 2016, described that there's a specific set of emotions tied to the human cognitive response following a terrorist attack. The research outlined that fear and anger are a typical response among most populations that experience terrorist activity. Kim, 2016. This was challenged by conducting a study that found through high school students the psychological understanding of terrorism is formed through religious teaching. Akisi and Agdadin, 2020. This suggests that the perspective of fear and anger that is displayed throughout the response phase could be greatly altered based solely upon the individual's understanding of how to react. Forcina et al., 2019, expanded on this by including that Islamic extremism is a commonplace theme that gives meaning to how individuals react when considering a terrorist scenario. Salvatore and Gabriel, 2019, disagreed with this trend by explaining that fear and anger displayed throughout individuals during terrorist activity is a normal post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD) response. A PTSD response is tied together through fear, anger, and emotion. Akisi and Agangdan, 2020, Kim, 2016, and Salvatore and Gabriel, 2019. This psychological response is a vital and integral part of understanding terrorism, but more specifically, cyberterrorism. The expansion of technology certainly has had a major impact on how conclusions are made throughout cybersecurity and terrorism. Technology is a large factor in the development of cybersecurity strategy. Tech giants like Apple and Microsoft are always working on ways to provide growth for developers while helping people connect in different ways. This creates a vulnerability throughout different platforms as they interact. Kaludi and Lee, 2020, discussed the impact artificial intelligence has made on the topic of cyber threats. The findings suggest that there are 3 different paths at stake when considering how technology can affect cyber terrorism threats. Kaludi and Lee, 2020. These are lumped into categories with corresponding labels of computer versus cyber versus artificial intelligence. Kaludi and Lee, 2020. Kirk, 2019, contributed to this by sharing that the boundary between artificial intelligence and human influence is vastly different. Artificial intelligence does not have the defined boundary, whereas human influence on cyberterrorism reaches a boundary when the physical framework runs out of area. Kirk, 2019. The technology that comprises artificial intelligence is a different class and could have implications attached to it that elevate the threat of terrorist activity dramatically when it is put into the wrong hands. According to Tadeo, 2019, artificial intelligence is risky because as much as the machine learns, it can implement new processes, eventually leading to self-created events or protocols. A few examples of technological or cyber terrorism that exists, but one of the most recent events was found in the 2016 presidential election held in the United States. Following the 2016 general election, which focused on selecting the next President of the United States, or POTUS, There was much controversy as to whether or not there was a cybersecurity breach via Russian technology. Olin, 2017, discussed how professionals throughout the intelligence community had to launch an investigation into whether or not there was interference with the official results of the election. Findings from this article suggest that there was in fact Russians, government, and their people who used technology to have a leg up on the competition in the U.S. election for POTUS. Archaea, 2017, described these events as a dangerous wilderness where cybersecurity and terrorism intersect. Krisky, 2020, furthered the point by calling attention to computer bots and how they have become a thriving utility or entity among different services. While this may not be the most recognizable form of terrorism, it does continue the discussion on what types of threats exist as part of cybersecurity. With a vastly growing technological society being found around the globe, the need for understanding cybersecurity broadens. Yunus and Suleiman, 2017, explained how there are motivations for increased cybersecurity as a result of cyberterrorism. Here they described that terrorists are using the internet as a means to targeting a specific group of people. Yunus and Solomon, 2017. Koo and Kim, 2018, advanced this discussion by including that as technology, and more specifically the internet, develops, so does the increased probability of security incidents. This calls attention to a need for increased security protocol, risk assessment, and goals. Koo and Kim, 2018. A concluding idea from this research was that in order to achieve these items, they must coincide with long-term outcomes associated with cybersecurity. Banga, 2020, continued this discussion by highlighting that there is a severe lack of education into how to truly be cybersecure, as the internet has become a booming place to share information and connect with different people. This exposes vulnerability to what cyberterrorism is. There are large gaps in how data and information is stored across various networks. When this process falls apart, a greater risk fills the void for threats across different networks. A recent study examined the types of cybersecurity threats that exist with health information systems. Luna et al., 2016, pointed out that there are two sources from which the threats come internally and externally. Both are assigned different subcategories that define hazards and threats of each. Luna et al., 2016. Vandenberg and Kiemolen, 2017, said that there is also a need for individuals on the human side of cybersecurity to uphold its very integrity by anticipating hazards, working through each situation, and providing positive outcomes. Chatfield et al., 2018, discussed the need for a call to action that describes the need for cybersecurity policy against attacks. If information is attacked, it could erupt a catastrophic series of events. In order to assign responsibility and work towards a remedy, policy must exist at various levels of government. Policy that is meant to target cybersecurity varies from region to region around the globe. According to Fuller, 2019, the United States federal government has been ignoring the implementation of policies related to cybersecurity. Presently, legislation does exist, but there is not much enforcement or revisiting of it happening. Fuller, 2019. Griman, 2015, described how much relevant policy exists throughout different countries in a comparison to understanding cybersecurity policy in a more holistic manner. Within the United States, several acts of policy exist, but need to be revised as the last ratification was noted in 2006. Griman, 2015. Then, Kim et al., 2017, found that the ideas that surround surveillance as part of cybersecurity policy are not nearly as developed as they should be. A standalone idea that was brought to attention is that cybersecurity is truly borderless, making it have a greater gray area for policy that addresses all issues. Fuller, 2019, Griman, 2015, Kim et al., 2017. Forcina 2019 agreed by determining that it is difficult to mitigate terrorism through policy creation, as there are many different entities that have to be covered by a comprehensive policy. Dutton et al. 2019 suggested that there may not be a capacity at which humanity can create relevant cybersecurity policy to combat all forms of cyber terrorism. The ideas presented display that there are significant limits to what can actually be put in place to effectively mitigate cyber terrorism. Cybersecurity and terrorism are not a new topic of exploration throughout much of the United States. While terrorism up to the early 90s was largely an in-person assault on human life, it did not mean that some part of it was not technology-based or in the process of being used. The introduction of computers and the rapid advancement of cell phones into merely mobile miniature computers have made the situation surrounding cyber terrorism become a focal point. Expansion and growth of technology has an integral role in how individuals and agencies work through cyber terrorism. Colludi et al. 2020, Kirk 2019, Tadeo 2019. In addition to this, psychological response found in the individual and their communities are a unique place for the puzzle, or a unique piece of the puzzle rather, to unraveling cybersecurity and terrorism. One consideration has not been made, and that is the role stakeholders play in counterterrorism strategy. Policies that encompass protecting and policing cyber terrorism is still in the early development stages. This is a unique position where the stakeholder becomes an integral developmental role in counterterrorism. The internet and consistent development of technology make it increasingly difficult to write effective policy. Governments can do everything in their power to create an effective set of legislation working towards answering questions from risk assessments about cybersecurity and terrorism, but there is no one solid way to do so. Research has concluded that cybersecurity is a tricky subject to write effective and enforceable legislation on. Fuller 2019, Greiman 2015, Kim et al. 2017. Terrorism mitigation policies in place throughout the U.S. history are in need of support from key stakeholders outside of the majority of major governance found throughout much of the U.S., because they are primarily written around events that happen to people physically. This is a significant gap in treating conditions that are beyond the realm, as it was found throughout much of the research in this study. Findings provided that there is not enough cybersecurity policy in place in much of the U.S. The study explains where cybersecurity policy is at in the U.S. The psychological response is an important step to knowing what drives cyber terrorism and why security must exist. The analysis of technology growth helps shed light on the topic and why it is important to safety and security for all people. This calls attention to what cybersecurity currently is. This is not just what it is, but where it is and where it needs to go. There is a significant need for policy revision, and this study looks to answer why that is and who will benefit from it. There are many vulnerabilities as technology growth continues to expand over the next several years. Policy creation must be considered to mitigate potential hazards and threats to different people, different groups, and infrastructure included. By using the framework of many other anti-terrorism policies, the U.S. can create a stronger foundation for the future of cybersecurity. It is clear that policy creation surrounding the cybersecurity and terrorism mitigation landscape must become a priority for the U.S. going forward, because there has been a severe lack of its existence. Thank you for viewing my presentation. Here you can find a comprehensive list of references and all the research that was done to support this study and this paper for my final project in PA 522 at Upper Iowa University. Take care and God bless.